This is meant as a potential class lecture. Did you know that Ronald Wilson Reagan's wartime film with Errol Flynn, Desperate Journey, was made by the men who first used the Burning Cross in association with the Ku Klux Klan in the film Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffith? The image I found of Reagan in that film next to a U.S. over the swastika is on the reel of the film, but goes by too fast to see. It can only be detected frame by frame, an eerie signature from an imperial Wizard of Oz. After World War II, Hollywood adopted a shadowy continuation of partnership with the Axis of fascism that was developed before war broke out. Cooperation that was originally intended to preserve Hollywood markets in Germany and develop shared sympathies. Under the auspices of the fossil fuel oil wars, military industrial complex, and Axis Hollywood, they morphed into a fundamentalist holy war machine, a fundamentalist tripartite with extremist elements of all three major religions, as well as some of the fringe groups in religion. And they created a war game known as Two Virgins Pussy Bowl, which is in the super story found in the background of international cinema, which announced their reasoning to build an arc of colors by a form of pornographic warfare called genocide, which was the AIDS attack. And they used the Venus flytrap model from the administration of the university system on Mount Desert Island in the 1980s. This insidious continuation of fascism was a commercial partnership that was sustained during the war, allowing Axis Cinema to solicit and finally control politically influential elements of Hollywood after the war, much as the defeated reasserted their power through Hollywood with the film The Birth of a Nation after the war between the states of the Civil War. This was particularly so of the faction led by Ronald Reagan during what is known as the Red Scare, fearing what was known as a Brown Scare, which meant revulsion towards Nazi thuggery. Reagan shrewdly conducted commentary and letters, forcing observers to swallow the word fascism by dressing in civilian clothes. The Reagan machine made clear that the word fascism was not going to be permitted in American political discourse about their party's platforms and tactics. In turn, they would pretend that they weren't. In this mission, rock music was their secret weapon. My father served on the U.S. San Jacinto, as did George Bush. His first book in the 1940s was called America's Stake in Human Rights. My mother called my father a genial man. He could be whimsical, and he was well liked in part because the way he casually went about trustingly offering his life to the Pittsburgh backblade when they dove in the name of the German Green Party. They marred his name with indelibles, as is their wont, for they are part of the new Cirque d'Imbecile crowd of indelible Zodiac killers, which this critical assessment will address. If he were alive today, I would discuss with him a continuation of what we discussed before when he was alive, that he so whimsically suggested I call a dissertation by the name of God, Guns, and Rock and Roll. I'd say, Father, it's miseducation not to explain that faux cult brokered with the Ayatollah at the time when Fripp, the ingenue bringing Gurdjieff openly into the rock industry, was prancing around with Bush and Colin Powell, writing their Swami Nostra alibi for Mount Desert Island, Venus flytrap, while Seattle queers with sacrificial murders from the indelible Zodiac. We need to teach that D'Annunzio's Fayum was known to Gurdjieff and that Fayoum was not only the birthplace of fascism, but is frequently compared to Woodstock, for rock and roll announced the path in a long invisible arm of the fourth way intelligence between D'Annunzio and Lenin, decreeing tragic loss for myself, the Kennedys, and anyone who claims legitimacy to the American enterprise. D'Annunzio knew Ouspensky, as did the leaders of prog rock from Britain. But most importantly, perhaps, Diaghilev worked with D'Annunzio Ouspensky because they're the Cubists and futurists of the Fourth Way. It was Freddie Luigi, an acolyte of D'Annunzio, who founded the Italian Futurist Cinema School that introduced D.W. Griffith to Mussolini. D'Annunzio is not clearly shown yet to have been friends with Gurdjieff. They both were of Iraq, owner of the New Age, a prominent journal of the age. A tragic machine consciousness has overtaken common sense in the USA. The tawdry mind of Yoko Ono works with the British Army and Roger Waters, who love to brag that they have thought of everything in their plotting. Boxing in, for example, Greta Thunberg with the blackmail that either she cooperate or be cast as Lady Macbeth by the Texas School Book. A man is a very mean-spirited warlocky shaman, and they call themselves by the heart. I'm sure that we face a crisis of miseducation, not to explain how it comes to pass that D'Annunzio's Fayoum, birthplace of fascism, and is so often compared to Woodstock, indicates a great deal about the pathways taken by rock and roll, where the prime movements of British prog rock like to wiggle that they are the warlock Gurdjieff and his fight club of secrecy. Miseducation in the U.S. is an era of UW dialectical, administrative, military sociology, replacing personality cults with a program wizard board that goes by the name of Swami Nostra or the Green Party, an invisible fourth way intelligence, while the acolytes of the streets hiss at you and scream, Ringo, yeah, while they pillage and mayhem. The problem is that we once had common sense and believed in civics. Common decency was our objective in our struggle. Black people wouldn't leave this, now they've embraced this bizarre machine. When Dr. King opposed Vietnam War, this fringe of the NAACP accused him of mutiny. They wanted to get ahead by bombing Vietnam and Iraq, and they voted Obama. I'm not saying that Russia is innocent in the matter. They destroyed our relations with Russia by expanding NATO in the Ukraine. And they gave us leaky jobs, pornographic genocide. The idea for all this may come out now in projecting a panorama of bloodshed that the UW administration ghoulously mongers as equity. But the idea is a combination of ideas that entirely disappeared, for which copious evidence for group sodorization exists, that it was being hidden in broad daylight by the perpetrators themselves. It goes back to the days of 1918. Diaghilev and Blas Sanders, the literary giant with one arm, lost in World War I, who became the invisible arm of the idea of Ouspensky and Houdini, a Lazarus, a Houdini, a disappearing, instead of a personality cult, a hidden agency of the fourth dimension, working deep media operations for fascism's resurgence and Axis revenge. They called the combination of spirits of Lenin and Adolf Hitler by the name of Casper. This gives you an idea how ghoulish they are, but they recruited from the NAACP, the black warmongers joined them. They called it an arc. They continue to work here in Tacoma at UW Dialectical. This may not seem to make sense. The idea that the only explanation that can explain everything seems to be impossible. But the evidence shows what they were up to. They hid back in the days of Disney and Sergei Eisenstein. The idea of a Casper, a Lazarus, a Houdini, something that Queen Elizabeth had them calling the walrus. And they use the signs and symbols as an inscription, a background otherwise unstated, in a super story of two virgins' pussy ball told throughout international cinema. It was also all about the assassination of Kennedy, as they said this way and led him into their trap. They have not exactly wanted disclosure. They inherit the idea of hiding the double cross in broad daylight like a Zodiac killer. And the sleepfrog oligarchy crosses many boundaries in the material world, nulling many raptures and fulfilling many fantasies. Meanwhile, there's no safety. You can think of the semiotics and gangster signs as a burning cross, while a sheriff says there ain't no cross burning on your lawn, while it flames in plain view. Most of the material is not in the least contested. The idea that Houdini was around and the idea it landed on all their desks at the same time is not in the least contested material. How could they miss it? Well, they didn't miss it. That's why it disappeared. They adopted it. To understand what they did takes no great efforts once you see what their idea is. There's a great deal that comes out, for example, from the fourth dimensional psychologist opposing socialist Russia from Kharkiv, whose reach spans to the Liverpool crowd later in the century. And it's important to remember that Liverpool was the site of the Confederate Secret Service during the Civil War. Just knowing that these insiders had Errol Flynn, who lived in Laurel Canyon, where Houdini had lived. It was rumored to have met with Hitler during World War II and starred with Reagan in the film I have already described. It may begins to glare at you from the desks of D.W. Griffith, Sergei Eisenstein, the Russian Grand Cinema Director, and Disney, who Eisenstein greatly admired, divulging much in his review of praise. Behind the wheels of Luigi Freddi, who brought Griffith into the Babylon of Benito Mussolini, and Forgiveness by Alan Dulles, a Warren Commissioner, and Hitler's campaign debts and his arrangement of Cecil B. DeMille's leadership of Radio Free Europe is the low-profile presence of a literary theorist, Bly Sanders. He reached from Stravinsky to Robert Anton Wilson in present-day state of Washington, where a gang I frequently confront as Zodiac killers and sometimes describe as licky chops pornographers, hold fake federal dominion from federal Green Party sway. Whether you choose to call their idea by any of their several names, Walrus, Lazarus, Casper, or Belias from the Cinders, what they did and how they did it is well worth knowing. You'll never be able to shake the semiotic and lyrics of the hoary host of Martyr once the historical narrative unfolds into your awareness and the idea takes presence from the semiotics and lyrics that they used. But at least it is a new filter known as actual information about the rock music Double Cross from Access Hollywood. The topic is here in ruthless, simple language, here in cinema. The hidden idea transcends the superstory, which is described in background celluloid. To amend our understanding of the real world, it tips their hand. The hidden idea, in other words, comes through from the history of these people, the company they kept, the magic they revealed, and most importantly of all, what they hid so effectively that the superstory can just barely disclose it. It takes little more to gather up the indications and sadly announce, so elementary, and how could this be? The golden parachute is embroidered with memories of names like General Edwin Walker, a ruthless crank who sued his victims for divulging his outrages. Names come into Zodiac, cusp to John Wayne, and homemade images they both had of Lee Harvey Oswald. Attackers continue to be treated by saints by the poor half of the world, the Svengalis who control the world's wealth, recognition, and those who totally disgracefully for their approval, like Joseph Biden. They rigged the dungeon of their mania with moxie. Tabloids spill from the time capsules of their shrinks, whose protective closet's only a movie, summons us to a new chapter, the indelible zodiac. While mongering these sideshows, leaving breadcrumbs for scavenger journalists on Earth, such as that Manson and Jack Ruby had the same psychiatrist, and that King Crimson was working with a psychiatrist from Attica State Prison while living in Pittsburgh. It's a simple, ruthless, hidden, invisible hand working very hard. Simply put, the super story was the rescue of Hitler to Argentina and two virgins' pussy ball, a Church of England war game, for his friend Duke Edward said that Hollywood belonged in the hands of the Church of England. Marital martial law by civil overlook clogged to the AIDS attack, proving it was one. Built in the Pennsylvania boondock for Tudor was a Texas school book. The secret isn't just that John Lennon was given the starring role in this You Only Live Twice, where doubles dare, with Trump media covering for his fake murder, and Hollywood Pentagon Disney magic, giving driving force to his will among the culture most at risk. Reagan's attorneys even had me in D.C. the day he claimed he was shot. He came outside the night before and waved to me while they gave me a brochure that reads, "There's no such thing as objective reality, only what the jury believes." The real secret is that they planned it, beginning in World War I. Europe's finest and their tin drum guerrillas, all specialized for the plan of a coming dominion, ensorceling by their violence and rage and through their influence in glam rock and other mediums. They mongered and wreaked havoc in the name of celebrity temper tantrums.